everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. I'm your host, Ana Trujillo Limon, and today I'm super excited to be joined by Luis Barajas, who's like a legend to me in this industry. So, Luis, thank you so much for joining me today on the Framework.
Anna, I am so happy to be with you, and I'm also happy to hear somebody pronounce my name in Spanish. You could have said Luis Barajas, but I say Luis, but you said Barajas, so that's good.
Yeah, we had Luis Rosa on the show not too long ago, and he was talking about like going back and forth between Luis and Luis. And for me, like I'm Anna, but sometimes I'll answer to Anna. Like when you call me Anna, I'll answer. But yeah, it is always nice and refreshing to hear our names pronounced so beautifully. So, well, we always like to kick things off here on Framework by talking about food because I mean, I love food. Jamie loves food when he's here. He talks about it all the time. So tell us about what your favorite food is or your current food obsession.
My current food obsession, I guess, is finding the best soft shell taco, just regular Mexican tacos with the best meat and everything else. Everybody's got an obsession. Everybody's got a taco truck in Southern California.
Yeah.
So right now, I guess tacos are Mexican food right now. My favorite. Sometimes I go to Italian food, and I'm just like I for some reason I have to have pizzas, but right now tacos are my favorite food.
What like are your favorite like meats for your tacos?
Carne asada,
Yeah.
barbacoa. I'm not going to say lengua, this tongue, for people who are listening to
Not
us.
this time, huh?
The sesos, the brains, right?
Yeah.
Like, what the heck is this guy talking about, right? The stuff nobody eats is really delicious. So I'm pretty
Exactly.
much, I'm not gonna do vegetarian or chicken. So I'll give you all the meats.
Yeah, I'm a tacos de camarón girl myself
There
lately.
you
That's been my
go, shrimp
obsession.
taco.
Yeah. So, but I know you split your time between Miami and Los Angeles, right? And you've traveled a lot, but is there a favorite spot you have in Miami? Because I went to UM and I like have a couple of favorite spots down there, but is there something down there that you like to, or are the tacos good down there, or is there a different
You
food?
know, you know, actually, let me just share with you. It's really interesting, right? In Miami, so I live in Brickell, in
Mm,
Miami, kind of the downtown Miami spot. And whenever I get there, I will share with you. It's really funny. There's a little tiny place called Su Vice.
mm,
It's a Peruvian place, and I love the ceviche that they have there. And it's in Brickell though. It's a little place. They have several of them, but that's a place that I always go to.
mm,
And I have the one with the jalapenos and all the hot stuff. And then I never leave the airport when I go back and forth because I live in Irvine, California, mostly
mm,
in Irvine, California. And I have to get on. If you actually follow me on Instagram, you'll see that you'll know when I am in Miami heading back because I stop at La Carreta and have my café con leche.
yeah.
Never. I will not leave that place until I get my café con leche. I don't care if I'm running late. I'd rather miss my plane so I can have my café con leche.
They don't do café con leche anywhere the way they do at La Carreta. So the one at the airport, yes, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
And then hold on a second. Then there's another place that's really good. I know this is gonna at the Publix. So I live literally I live on 9th Street. So I literally across the street there's a Public and there's a side window where all the construction workers line up for their coffee in the morning. And there's this lady that's been there since I don't know since the last 5 or 6 years, and she already knows that I'm gonna put half the amount of sugar that they normally put.
oh
She
yeah.
makes the best café con leche. So if you're there at the Publix in Brickell, go to that side window and get your café con leche.
All right, I'll try that out. Yeah, we were actually at the Publix on Brickell. This summer we went. My husband and I went down. That was the first time I'd been back in like since I graduated from college. So it was really cool. And we went down there. We went. That's the closest Publix we could find to our spot that we rented. So I was actually there. I didn't try the café con leche. I missed out, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
delicious, delicious stuff. So another fun thing, like I'm always curious about, is to hear about people's first money memories. So what was the first money memory that you have?
I will share with you. I've told this story various times. So my dad was a blue collar worker, right? Immigrant from Mexico. Had like a sixth grade education, but worked his butt off. Worked two jobs all the time, and back in the '70s, we had going through recession, lost his job. And I remember my sister and I don't know, we were probably about maybe 7 and 9. I was probably 9 years old, and they hadn't been able to take us out anywhere, and the ice cream truck would come all the time, right? And we would see all the little kids get their ice cream truck. And I remember my dad. My dad didn't have a lot of money, but he had a small coin collection, and he had Mercury dimes and Buffalo nickels, and those were sacred to him. He didn't have a lot of them. And I remember that one time my sister was crying because she wanted an ice cream. And I saw my dad go into his coin collection and pull out some Mercury dimes and Buffalo nickels and buy us ice cream through that. I remember that. I knew that my dad, that was a big sacrifice for him because that was like something that he had. That's the only thing he had. And that's one of the money memories. Also, the other money memory that I have that I always laugh is my parents in their bedroom. Remember those big 5-gallon water bottles here in Southern California? They were sparklets, water.
Mhm.
Those big plastic containers for water bottles. Well, my parents saved all their pennies in there and nickels and dimes, whatever. This is years later. And they would have, I mean, they would fill it up. And then I remember that it was so heavy you couldn't even pick it up. They would
Yeah.
knock it down. They would go get all those little things from the bank to
Oh,
put
like
their,
the papers.
and we would
Oh
spend
my
like the whole
god.
afternoon, instead of people putting like a puzzle together or something as a family,
Yeah.
we would put in the little paper, we put all the pennies and we would get the 50 cents, wrappers.
Yes.
Those are the money memories that I have of my parents.
I love that the saving in the big gallon and the big jugs. My sister and I used to have a Coke bottle. Like our auntie bought us a little. Well, it wasn't so little. It was like 3 feet tall, a Coke bottle. And turns out I didn't realize she still had it, and she had all the change. And we're about to go to Mexico, and she posted a picture on Facebook. She's like, and we called it Cokie. Like we were not very imaginative, right? She's like, I just cashed in all my coins from Cokie. I'm like, half of that is mine. So she promised me 31.75 in American dollar in pesos for me. So we'll see if she delivers. So, but so on the show, Jamie talks a lot about his fog machine as his first big purchase, and me and my Sony stereo. But what was the first big purchase you remember making?
Wow, what is the first big? I graduated. So I went to UCLA. I worked 40 hours while I was at UCLA. I never took out a loan, and in my senior year, I borrowed money. Now this is when UCLA was like $286 a quarter. But I borrowed like $3,000. I had gotten involved in real estate. I had a real estate license, and I was trying to do stuff on the side. Plus, I worked at the UCLA partnership program, trying to get minority kids into the school. I would work on the summer programs and work throughout the year. And I fell into a deal where I could probably buy a house for 3,000. It was a home in LA for, what did I buy for? I think it was like $49,000, and I used $3,500 of a school loan, the only loan I ever took out, to buy that house. And 2 years later, I sold that house for 175,000. Like 3 years later, I sold it for $175,000.
Wow, that's a
So that was my very first big purchase. I was probably about 18 years old, 19 years
wow.
old.
That's a good foresight for a 18, 19-year-old person to make an investment like that. I don't
Yeah, well,
remember.
my dad got me involved in business out of necessity. So I was like 11 years old. And, when I was 11, my dad lost a couple jobs and he bought a welding machine so he could start a wrought iron business. And if people don't know what a wrought iron business, that's what they build. He'll make custom made wrought iron metal doors and gates and window guards. And I helped him fill out his first business license, right? And then at the age of 13, the IRS showed up to my dad's shop, and my dad hadn't filed his tax returns. And so my dad looked at me and he said, "Do you know how to do a tax return?" I didn't even know what that was, but I asked the IRS lady if there was a book. And so where I grew up in Boyle Heights. There's East Los Angeles, and within East Los Angeles, there's a place called Boyle Heights. And it's a very kind of impoverished community. So my dad drove me 15 miles to a bookstore to buy a book because back then there was no bookstore in that community. And I will share with you, as of last night, there is no bookstore in that community. So I read the book from cover to cover at the age of 13, filed my dad's tax returns. And back then you would get all the tax forms at the post office. I know there's a lot of people who'll never even understand what that's like. And I did my dad's tax return in pencil at the age of 13.
Wow, that's a crazy story. So when you were did you remember like what you wanted to be when you were growing up, or did that kind of shape like there was your path, or
I wanted
did
to
you have
play
like
baseball. I
yeah?
wanted to play baseball, and I will share with you that the business, because I was the eldest and I spoke English and I did really well in school, it just came naturally to me. I always played baseball. I was a pitcher, and I was really good. In high school, I threw out my arm.
Oh,
But at the age of 15, we got audited for those returns that I did.
oh no.
Right, and I mean that day that we went with the IRS auditor, nothing happened. Even the lady asked me, goes, "Well," she asked my dad who filed his returns because I didn't sign them for him, and my dad said my son did, and she asked me how old was I, so I was 15 years old at the time. He goes, "Well, you couldn't have done them; they were 13 years old." So we won the audit because I think she felt sad for us. We were really poor, and then that's when I made a commitment. I told my dad I'm going to learn everything there is about money and finances and taxes because Dad, it was just so. I mean, we were stressed out. Like we thought we were going to lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know. We thought the IRS would take. We thought we were going to go to jail or something.
Oh.
And that was the level of stress that I had. And so I made a commitment, but I never knew that you can go to college and study that. Remember, no one in our family had ever been to college. And then when I was in high school, I finished high school early, and I went through one of those ROP programs where I went to and got a medical assistance license. I was a licensed medical assistant at the age of 17. I lied about my age, got a job working for a osteopath, giving injections. Giving injections for people to lose weight and drawing blood. And so when I got to UCLA, I went pre-med.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually thought I was going to be a doctor. Again, nobody knew, right? My son, the doctor, because I worked at this clinic in East Los Angeles, right back then. And then I got to UCLA, and they said, I took my first Chem 11A class, and they said, look to your left, look to your right. Only one of you will be here next. And I looked, and the people looked a lot smarter than I did. And I said, oh, shoot, that's not me. So I became a sociology major, and then my roommate at college, told me that he was going to go get an MBA, and I said, "Well, what's that?" And he said, "A master's in business. You can go to school and study for like business." And I learned, and then I went and got my MBA at Claremont Graduate School when Peter Drucker was there.
Oh wow.
So and then I met somebody there who was in financial planning and had a Series 7, and he worked for back then it was IDS, then became IDS American Express, then became Ameriprise. And that's how I got involved in financial planning.
That's really cool. You were kind of one of my first introductions to financial planning because while I didn't really understand what it was before I kind of got into like when I first started at FPA, was familiar with your book, the Latino Journey to Financial Greatness. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like look at Latino and he's talking about money. I thought that was so awesome. And so but I know that you've been very entrepreneurial and you have several businesses and you have like a niche. It seems very glamorous. I follow you on all the social channels. And so you work with a lot of artists and athletes and actresses. So talk to us a little bit about how you carved out that niche, kind of how you got there and what is it like to work with famous people?
Yeah. So what happened was in 1990, the year that my daughter was born, I had tragedy happen all in a matter of about a month and a half, and I quit. I was working for a big, high-profile CPA firm called Kenneth Leventhal out in Newport Beach, California. I quit my job and I went back to East LA to help the underserved. Right? I mean, I actually opened up an office in Boyle Heights to help the poor. And there's a great story behind that, but it would take us a while. So what happened was I realized that I had been really poor, but I didn't know that I was poor because I had wonderful parents and a wonderful family background. And then I made it out of the barrio, and then I started working with high-profile clients that were multimillionaires and billionaires in the Anglo community through the CPA firm. I was one of the first CFPs there. And then I quit, and I went back to the barrio. Then I realized that remember, this is back in the 90s where there was really no internet, and there was no financial literacy, and Latinos were over 60% unbanked, meaning no checking, no savings, nothing. They would go cash their checks at the check cashing places for a fee, a percentage of their earnings. So I realized that after a while, no amount of financial literacy would help an impoverished community. It was not about financial literacy, it was about the mindset, because I was teaching classes. I was teaching classes at the local, at the markets there. Believe it or not, they would have rooms where I could teach classes and do webinars at the carnicerias. I know it sounds weird, but those are the meat markets. And so what happened was that I started writing a book about what cultural limiting beliefs were really kind of stopping Latinos from achieving wealth. And so what I did is I started realizing that there was a space that I need to prepare my community to be able to get rid of the why bother to save or invest if I'm never going to have any money mindset, that scarcity mindset that came from my community. So maybe they could read the books from the financial literacy books, the Dave Ramsey books, or whomever books were at the time, right? The Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey books. And I didn't want to write another financial literacy book. And so what happened was I ended up writing, and I'll tell you how I write that book, but I ended up writing 5 books. But on the 3rd book, I did a commercial for Hyundai because they were doing a commercial about I think Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman were coming out of a Hyundai car and say, hey, that's a great value. And then they were looking for somebody nationally to come out and do the commercial with them. And my next door neighbor, unbeknownst to me, was the head of global marketing for Hyundai. I thought he sold cars because every time I saw him with a brand new Hyundai. And so he came to me and he showed me the Latino journey to financial greatness. At that time, my face was on the cover of the book.
Yeah.
And he walked over to the house and he goes, is this you? And I said, yes, it is. And I said, you write books? And I said, yeah, how come you never told me? He goes, you're my neighbor. Nobody talks about what they do. And he goes, you know what I do? And I said, you sell cars, you sell Hyundais. He goes, no, I'm the head of global marketing. We want to do a commercial. And I'm working in the barrio and I'm not making any money. I mean, I'm living on fumes, right? And so he offered me, I think it was like $40,000 or $35,000 to do a one-day commercial. The actress in that commercial ended up befriending me and hiring me. And long story short, after a couple of years, she was married to a guy who worked at Sony Music Latin. She's almost become like she is like a sister to me now. But her husband got a promotion to Sony Music in Miami, and he called me and he said, compadre, he said, I go, what? I said, I've been promoted to Sony. Can you still continue helping us? I said, of course. And so his name was Nir Sharusi, and he ended up becoming a president of Sony Music Latin. A dear, dear, dear friend who always wants to do the right thing. And, he actually introduced me to Latin entertainers that needed help. One of them was, Jenny Rivera. And right before she passed away, I helped her with getting her estate plan done. I'll take care of all that. And from there, it grew. And then my wife came on board and helped me out. So we created a firm called Business Management Lab, and Lab stands for Luis Angie Barajas, right? That's where Lab comes from. We have a team of 24-something people. We've been on Billboard Magazine's top business managers list for the last 5 years running, 5 years in a row. And we have some of the most iconic artists. We have Nicky Jam, we have Jenny Rivera. We've worked with Juan Gabriel. We've worked with Mao and Ricky, Ricardo Montaner, Camilo. I mean, I can go on and on and on with actors and actresses, but I still retain all my clients from the barrio. I have not lost one. After 30 years, I still work with people, and we still get people from the barrio. But now I get people from the barrio from Texas and Florida and New Mexico. But and I can tell you stories. But at the end, we work with about 38 really, really super high-profile clients, making anywhere from $3 million to $35-40 million a year. And all of them grew up poor. They're all Latino, and and their families didn't have any money. So talk about, making instant money real quick. So that's been a journey with our entire firm.
Oh, I love that. And then that's so important too. I think, just anecdotal evidence, like a lot of people who come from poverty and make a bunch of money, they end up not, knowing what to do with it and end up squandering it. So that's so cool that you're working with the community to build that generational wealth so it doesn't just disappear with them. But yeah, I saw your picture with Nicky Jam yesterday and I was like, look at that. So did you do the Hyundai commercial? Is that
I
what I
did.
understand?
I did the Honeycomb. If you go back and look it up, it's like 19, 15, 17 years ago. I don't
I'm
even
gonna
remember
go
when.
find it.
Yeah,
So
it's a
you're no
Hyundai commercial. You're gonna see me coming out of a car, and the actress that comes out on it,
uh,
she is now like my sister. She is, I love her to death. So she's wonderful.
So you're no stranger to TV. So I know before we got on the call, you were talking about you have a new reality show. So tell us about that and what's that all about?
Yeah, so a production company reached out to me, told me that they had just a real famous production company that's won a whole bunch of Emmys doing reality shows. Just got a contract with PBS to do 13 episodes of a show called Opportunity Knocks, and they will have 3 financial empowerment coaches, myself, Gene Chatsky, and Patrice Washington. And we will follow 6 families throughout a year. And these are families that are having not just an isolated financial incident problem, but a whole complex of problems, right? And so my job is to do a lot of the life coaching. So, there's a whole concept of life coaching, right? And the books came out. I read a book that said that life coaching started like in 1996 or something. I was doing life coaching in the barrio back in 1990 because nobody had money, right? Nobody had money. Everything was life coaching. I used to weigh like 90 pounds, and now I weigh over 200. The reason, because they used to feed me in food. They didn't have money to pay me. So when you talk about food, honestly, it was a very impoverished community, and so I continue doing that work. People confuse me; they don't know whether I work with really super high-profile celebrities or I just go out and speak nationally. But my love and my passion is I always wanted to create a firm that my dad and my mom My mom got pregnant with me age 15, had me at 16. My dad doesn't have a big education, but back then, Luis Barajas, who was 11 years old, was their financial mentor, was their financial guide, and that I found that to be terrible. I don't want any child to be able to have that kind of stress. So I created a firm in which there was complete honesty, transparency for anyone. That's why I've never had a minimum. I know that I deal with super wealthy clients where I could have a minimum of $2 or $3 million a year for on the investment side. I've never had a minimum. My thing is that I learned a lesson though working in the barrio, and I learned one lesson. I know one lesson for sure is that you can't help people who don't want to be helped or aren't ready to be helped. But I've always made a commitment that if anybody were ever to approach me and wanted the help, I would help them, and that's how we've always been, and so that's what we've done. So like I said, that dichotomy of working with both keeps you grounded, keeps you humble. But everything I do for my parents and I do for my grandmother, who's the love of my life as well, who helped raise me, and so that's what I've done. That's why when people tell me, well, I see now the young Latinos coming into the industry. Well, there's no books on for Latinos. I've written 5 through HarperCollins, Thomas Nelson, whatever. It's like you're not doing a Google search. I've done over 300 television interviews. Probably I've spoken nationally. Probably on every single state. I don't think I've ever spoken in Kentucky. That's the only. Oh no, I have actually in Kentucky. I have spoken there. So for the last 30 years, run on poverty and issues of financial dignity and poverty. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. That's my love, and that's what I continue to do till the day I die.
I love that so much. But like working with your clients still from the barrio, do you notice like the changes in terms of building that generational wealth? Or talk to me about like some of the positive changes and paths and trajectory that you've noticed still working with them all these years.
Yeah. So let me just tell you that the income gap gets bigger, right? And so what I'll share with you is when I started, there was no financial literacy, there was no internet. You relied on paying financial advisors, back then stockbrokers, right, for advice. That's why you paid them a lot of money. And then now then the internet happens, and then all these nonprofit organizations start creating a lot of information, but everybody else kicks in. And so now it became where I've got too much information. Who do I trust and who do I? But now it's too much information, right? And then one of the problems that I've seen now is that a lot of young people are very cynical because they don't know who to trust anymore. And we don't know who's manipulating the conversation to try to sell a product without trying to seem like they're selling a product, right? What we've done though is we've got the democratization of financial planning by the financial technology like the Robinhood. But again, because our firm still does tax returns for people from the barrio, we've got a lot of people now, a lot of the kids of my older clients will do their tax returns. And this year we saw more Robinhood 1099s than I've ever seen. And most of them had losses. And the problem is they started seeing the Robinhood as the same thing that sometimes poor people do. Is back then when I was in the barrio, the way people would try to make money, they would line up when the lottery had, it's like $10 million for the lottery, and they would lines out of the corner liquor store selling that. That's the only way they thought they would ever make money, ever get wealthy, instead of doing some kind of plan. I kind of saw this past year through this COVID I saw the young kids trying to make the same kind of, almost using Robinhood as like the lottery that we had back in the barrio. So I think that we've now opened up the technology to help everyone and anyone. The problem is that financial planning industry is not set up to help from the 0 to the 90th percent. They really just kind of help the 10%, really kind of the top 5%, but let's just say the 10% or above. And so now all the tools and technology in English and Spanish are available there. We just have to teach them how to use it, and again, go back to the simple education. We've tried to make things very complex because, again, people need to sell stuff, and I think that kind of makes them feel important if they can take a subject and make it complex. Financial planning is not complicated. It's not difficult. It's just very there's a lot of discipline in it. So what's good about it? We got a lot of information. There's a lot of great information. It's just knowing where to go get it.
Yeah, like knowing how to vet that information too, like is kind of an issue, I think. And that kind of leads me into my next question, which is I know you've been a big champion for diversity in the profession. You're working with the CFP board, and I know together we helped launch that FPA Latino way back in 2018. So talk to me a little bit about that work and why you're passionate about that and what you kind of good trends you see, work we still need to do, all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
So I started I started financial planning, and when I started right away, to me education was really important. So I joined the Denver College of Financial Planning back in like 1986, 87, right? I think that I'm one of the very first one, two, or maybe three first Latinos to get a CFP. I just noticed that on my FPA membership, I know the FPA's only been around for 22 years, but they merged with the ICFP and the IAFP. So technically, my membership on the FPA says I've been there for 30 years. I'm a 30-year member. And so I would go to the national conferences. And that's how I actually built my practice, by learning from the Anglo community who went out of their way to help me at these national conferences. And I would notice that there would be just like Percy Bolton, a black gentleman from Pasadena, California. Maybe I'd see one or two blacks, African Americans, and maybe I probably one or two Latinos. I wouldn't even find them. It would just be me. And I realized this is crazy. This has to change. And as I started writing books, I started doing a lot of work on the demographics of the U.S. and how everything was changing. Back then, Latinos were like 12% of the population, and I wanted to get other Latinos into because in the community there was so much need, and I wanted to get Latinos well educated and get the CFP and join the FPA and really be part of a community. And so I just made it a point to get involved at a national level. I became the first minority, not the first Latino, first minority on the national board of the FPA in 2004, 2006. They tell you can't come in with agenda, but I did. I came in with an agenda. I said, diversity is really important. I said, your membership is 28,000 members. When I was there, 28,000 members. And Alpha had started. It was the Latino CPA Society that became Alpha, the Association of Latino Professionals in Finance and Accounting. They had like 200 members. Mm-hmm. I introduced the FPA to Alpha, and I said, we've got to get them on board. We've got to mentor them, tutor them, get them. They're going to grow like you can't believe. Latinos are going to be like at 18, 19% by the year 2020. They're going to be at 18%, which they are now, and you're going to grow, right? And so when I was there, the 3 years, they spoke about diversity, but it was bringing in other advisors that were lawyers, insurance agents. That's the kind of diversity they were talking about. And so I was sorely disappointed, but I pushed really hard for them to start like a diversity advisory group with Sandra Davis and a few other people there, right? And so we did that. And then it just kind of waned and everybody kind of lost interest. And that was back in 2007, 2008. The CFP board called me, the Center for Financial Planning called me about 3 years ago and said, we're going to start this all over again. We would love you for you to be part of that. I actually just had to get off that board because I'm now, I don't know if I'm the first Latino on the national board, but I just got elected to the national board of the CFP. And that's another part of my agenda there is helping, bring in more Latinos to become CFPs, because I think we only have only 3.8 of blacks and Latinos are CFPs. Mm-hmm. So I've always been trying to get that diversity and inclusion in this community. We need it. And since I think 2005, 2006, the FPA has gone from 28,000 to 18,000 members. Alpha, they changed a little bit, but grew from 250 members. I think they're like at 30,000 or something. Yeah. I don't know at this point.
They blew up, that's for sure.
Because I think they let everybody in that's just a professional at this point, right? Yeah, but they had gotten to a point where they were like about 15,000. And so the goal was that I saw that most financial professionals were older white gentlemen that were going to retire, were going to pass away, and they needed to bring in fresh people and to accommodate the changing demographics. And between Latinos and African Americans, I mean, we represent almost over 30%, yet we only represent 3.8% of the CFPs. So I've always been involved in that, and lately I've been trying to do stuff a lot behind the scenes. I've been speaking nationally behind the scenes, but if you follow me on Instagram, you're not seeing any of that anymore. Mm-hmm. And the reason why is that at one point it was, if I put too much stuff out there, I wanted to be famous. If I didn't put stuff out there, I didn't care. So at this point, I'm doing it for Luis Barajas, and I continue to speak nationally to nonprofit organizations that deal with economic disparity and financial social injustice. And I've been doing it quietly, but still being recognized like by the CFP board. So that's that. It's been a lifetime work, and I will continue to do that. Again, I go back to until I die. I will continue to do that because the need is beyond great.
Absolutely. Yeah, that marrying of FP and alpha, like you kind of started to see that. I mean, I don't know, I'm not there anymore, but I know you were very instrumental in getting FP Latino started because, when I wrote the proposal and I wanted it all to happen, it was kind of like I don't know if it was going to happen until we were at the Diversity Summit in 2018 in New York City and you talked to our former CEO. And then from there it was, all right, well, Louis said, so I guess we'll do it.
Well,
So
and
that was
I will share with
awesome.
you that, yeah, honestly, when I found out that you kind of were put in charge there to also create the knowledge circles, right, the Latino knowledge
Mhm.
circle, I was so excited that it was in house. It was a Latina, right, that was doing it and could see the need and could understand what the challenges were. And then you left.
Yeah.
Uh,
But
but
look at
but
all this cool stuff I get to do now. Give
you get to do a lot of really cool stuff now, yeah. So no, the need is humongous. The need is great. Listen, if we had 10,000 more, people of color in CFP, that's not enough.
Mhm.
The need is great, and we have to find out ways how to help people who have become cynical, who have the mindset of why bother? I'll never be rich. Why not? Now the thing is that here, I've been the testing board. I've had 30 years of working with people in the barrio who now have over $1 million invested with us. I have teachers that never made more than $30,000 a year. I have obreros, blue collar workers. I have county workers who are now retired and doing really well because they did the things that they had to do, right? They took the discipline to save money over the long term and do the right things.
Yeah. And I'm a big like, I'm big on the foundational work in the community. Like I mean, I'm not from the city, or no Boyle Heights, but I'm from a impoverished neighborhood, where the median income is less than 21,000. It's around 21,000 um, a year, and it's 87% Latino, and it's like that's my dream, that's my vision, is that like my gente will be able to have access to this type of stuff, this type of education and planning, and be able to, you know, I don't know, overcome the barriers. Like that's my dream
Well,
for
and
us.
I'm gonna share with you. So I've been able to speak through all the book writing. I've been asked to speak all across the country for years. But here's what I've learned. I used to think it because again I didn't know anything. I didn't know any better. I just came from my community, and then I was asked to speak in African American communities, and then Lebanese communities, and then Anglo communities of where there was a lot of poverty. And so I started to realize that it's more socioeconomic
Oh
than
yeah.
things of culture or color. The only thing
Hmm.
is we call it different things, right? In our community, um, we call, like, for example, people, the men don't want to buy life insurance because we have the concept of el Sancho,
Hmm.
that if he dies, the wife's going to marry somebody else, and then the guy's going to end up with the money. El Sancho. That's stuff that nobody speaks about, and it's not in any book, and you're not going to learn it at any university or any CFP program.
Yeah.
Um, you know, African Americans will call it something else. Lebanese will call it, Middle Easterns will call it something else, but it's very similar. I think what happens is that when people are poor, they think a certain way,
Mhm.
and which creates obstacles of them to achieving wealth, right? So the mindset is really critical. You need the education, but you need to prep them and you need to create fertile. The minds have to be fertile to be able to accept that financial literacy and also ask great questions, right?
Yeah.
So again, I think when people are listening to us, it's just not about Latinos. It's about communities of empowerment that come in a lot of different colors.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's an interesting connecting point to another interview we did just recently with a young man named Lauren Jenkins. And Lauren, he founded a company called Mini Money Management. And basically, what Mini Money does is it goes into schools and it tailors the learnings to the kids that are there. But basically, he said it's not necessarily a race thing; it's a class thing, it's a socioeconomic thing, and this is the barrier that we're up against because we have a lot more in common than we have differences. So especially when it comes to socioeconomics and such.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
let me share with you one of my goals. My goals has always been is that I never had access to money, and then I started my little financial planning firm in Boyle Heights, and I would always admire the advisors that would have a minimum of $2 million or had all this technology, right? So I recently merged my firm with MGO Private Wealth. They handle some really big clients. I mean, if I mention the names, probably the top five most moneymakers in America right now, and I have access to everything. And I brought my clients, and my goal was always to give my parents the same access to financial planning that the super wealthy, right? And when I look at right now, when I have a meeting like with Nikki or with one of my clients that are very famous and their private jet and everything else, and then 30 minutes later I'm having a conversation with Abuelita, the grandmother from East LA, and I mean like sometimes an hour, 45 minutes later, but she has her money invested in the same money that Nicky Jam has or somebody else has. We use the same technology for her that we use it for any other artist or any executive making millions of dollars. And my parents have the same access too. And so to me, that's been my biggest joy right now that I have that, right? So the goal is that I always wanted to say, I wonder what it's like to be able to work in a place where everybody's really wealthy and they have everything. And I've always wanted to do that. And we've been doing that for the last, decade or so. But now it just fills my heart with joy when I do meet with like a Nikki, and then when I do meet with the abuelita, like sometimes 45 minutes later, and my wife says, "Why are you smiling?" She says, "Babe, in a million years, I never would have thought that I'd be at this point where I'm having this conversation. And it just feels so good to be able to help. Sometimes it feels better to help the abuelita out, to be quite honest with you."
Yeah, it's amazing impact, amazing. So I'm really curious, like with all of the things you do, like how do you kind of decompress, or what do you like to do for fun? You and Angie, what do you guys? Do you have time to step away from the business? Is that even a
No,
thing? Or
yeah. So so what happened is that when I joined MGO, we did tax returns. So I took that company out, and we work with a lot of Latin, really wealthy Latin people from Latin America. So I created a group called U.S. Latin Tax Group, and we do tax returns for people here in the United States, but who also come from Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, Spain. And then I'm a partner and the president of MGO Private Wealth, and also run the founder and a co-CEO of Business Management Lab. Plus, I write books, right? And I speak and travel, so I'm pretty busy all the time. I have grandchildren now. My wife got a Belgian Malinois. There's a movie out called Dog right now, so they don't know what kind of dog it is. That nonstop. I could sit here and literally be at my desk and work from 7 in the morning to 7 o'clock at night, maybe move 10 steps. They bring me my food. I'm so busy, meeting after meeting after meeting. Now I get out, I walk the dog an hour every day. I take her to go fetch a ball twice a day, and then play with a little stick and a rope. And then, and then travel with my wife as much as possible. We do what's called pockets of fun, right? We'll fly to Miami, we'll fly to New York to go meet with clients, but we always get an extra day. I go to the CFP board meetings in Washington D.C. One of my daughters lives out there with. I got two little grandkids right there, two little girls, and I always take an extra day or two to just go play with them. So that's what keeps up a lot of my time. But I will share with you, I have no desire to retire. My dad's 85 now, and he still kind of works half days. I will do this because I'm having fun and I love it. And as long as we're making an impact, right? As long as we're making an impact. I've actually written another book that I haven't released because of COVID. May release it next year. I'm talking on co-writing the book with another very, very famous author for next year. So I'm busy all the time, but I have a great, great staff. I've learned through a lot of coaching, how to have the right support and get the right help, because there's no way I could be doing all of this without the right people in place.
Oh yeah, that's critical. Having those folks to, delegate to, and having a good team in place. I know you brought up the books and writing and stuff. And so as a content creator, I'm always real cognizant of how content has helped, or, your advice to people who want to become content creators, maybe not necessarily writing books, but blogs or however. What do you have? What advice do you have for those folks wanting to do
Right?
that?
Yeah. I see, look, I read a lot of blogs, and a lot of it is just a repetition of the same thing you've read hundreds of times with a little tiny twist, or the same thing with the top 5, the top 6, the top 7, the top 10, just changing the different order. I would say write from experience. Write something like, for example, the book that I wrote, The Latino Journey to Financial Greatness, was a book that was written based out of meetings with clients about, and seeing the common themes of the cultural beliefs that they had about money, right? Somebody tells me that, well, how do you, like, I do education planning very different than most people. Like in the Bible, it depends, right? In the Bible, when a husband and wife would come and they want to do education planning, I knew that they had never gone to college and they weren't engaged, and I would have them bring me the kids' report card, a letter from their English and math teacher. I would have them take a self-esteem test. And if they weren't doing well in those areas, we wouldn't be putting money in a 529 plan. We would be hiring a mentor, a tutor. We would be sending the family to therapy. We would send the kids to, we would use Stella Coup in East LA to send them to these self-esteem workshops up in the mountains, right? And I learned about that and I wrote about that. And I think that every day, if you just listen to people and hear about what their fears are, their worries, what keeps them up at night, and really dig deep and go beyond the solution of a product, or go beyond, ask the questions, because everybody's got, and there's really interesting things that come out of there. So it's just, I said, have a curiosity that and here's the other thing. Because of my father, who's such a brilliant and intelligent man, but I guess he didn't go to college. But the thing is that he's been my mentor, and you can learn from anyone. Just here's what I've met a lot of people. I shouldn't say this, who have a ton of money and are about as dumb as you can be, and I've met poor people who are the wisest people that I've ever met. And so money doesn't make you smarter or dumber. Money makes you more of who you are. And so just because somebody has money, at least poor people think that just because they have money, they must be smarter than they are. They must know something else. They've just been sometimes lucky. They've been at the right place at the right time and had that, right? I work with a lot of musicians, as you probably know. I meet a lot of musicians that are much, much better than some of the musicians that I have that are making millions, but they just weren't at the right place at the right time. And so listen to everybody. Anyone can teach you. And just because they don't have a lot of money doesn't mean that you can't learn from them. So be open. So writers who are going to write content, write it from experience and write it from the heart. And unless you're going to be a technical writer, right? I write from the heart. I'm not a technical writer.
Yeah, I love that. I'm writing that advice down because yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the content out there that's kind of repetitive and the same stuff. So yeah, that's great advice because I'm noticing a trend of a lot of people wanting to create that content and do.
Well, here's the thing, Anna. I'm going to share with you. For example, when I tell people one of the things you got to do to become successful is you got to focus on your unique abilities, your God-given talents, right? But the problem is most people don't know what their God-given talents because it comes so easily to them,
Yeah.
right? Like you just told me, you come from a small community in which nobody earned more than 21,000, right? Maybe I would know what that looks like, but most people wouldn't know what that looks like. And what you think, the way people do things is the way everybody was doing things. So you think, I guarantee you that if you went back and went to your community and remembered the things that were going on, there's some wonderful life learning lessons there, right? Life learning lessons but you think, oh, why everybody did it because I grew up. Everybody, no, not everybody did it. Your experience is very different than anybody else's experience, and how
Yeah.
you interpret it.
For sure. And I love what you said about like your dad and like my grandfather too. My grandfather didn't go longer than eighth grade, and he was the wisest person. Like the advice he gave and the words he said, the wisdom he passed down is still passing it down to the next generation because he was just, amazing. And,
Yeah.
my grandmother who she did go to college, my grandma, she was like it was her negotiation. Like when my grandfather asked her to marry him, she's like, only if you let me go to college. so she did. She went. She didn't go till she was in her 50s, but started this trajectory. And it takes like one generation. But yeah, the people in my community are a gold mine of wisdom and just like they're very brilliant and smart and just beautiful people where I come from. Anyways, I could go on and on about Antonito, Colorado, which is where I'm from, but I won't because this is not about me. It's about you. So. And we always like to, end on a hopeful note. And you gave us a lot of information about the amazing impact and legacy you're leaving. But what is the legacy that you want to leave? When people, think of Luis Barajas, what do you want them to think of?
Well, um, I wrote something down because I kind of knew you'd be asking, and I said, what does it come down to? And I just want to know that I helped hardworking families eradicate financial injustice and economic disparity, and that I did everything possible that I possibly could, right? Um, Listen, the clients that I have were the single mothers who had beat up cars, who they had to put water in their, car, had to put water in the car or whatever. They didn't have enough gasoline money to get to work. They were afraid that their car would break down on the way from working from late night shift. I really try to create financial dignity. I don't save money for people to buy huge homes or have nice watches or really expensive luxury cars. I help them so they can have a car, a viejito car, but that they can rely on to get them where they need to be without worrying about not getting there to their children, not having to take abuse at work because they know that if they lose their job, they don't know what they're going to find. In the community that I grew up in, when somebody dies, we had to go and do a car wash or sell T-shirts to bury our own people in our own community. And if a family doesn't have enough to bury their loved ones, then there's no financial dignity. And how can we allow that to happen? I know that we worry about people not having food to eat and all that, but I'm saying that there's a level of financial dignity that everybody deserves and respects. But they also have to have their own effort into it. They have to put their own effort into it to get to that point. And it's not that complicated. They just got to figure out who they can trust and where to find that information. So, again, just helping hardworking families eradicate financial injustice and economic disparity. That's what inspires me, and that's what I hope I'm known for. That's it.
Oh, I love that. That's wonderful. I love that financial dignity, right? That's what we need. Well, Luis, it's been such a pleasure to catch up and to talk to you after, a time we haven't been able to connect, but I'm so appreciative of you taking some time for us today.
Anna, I'm here because I know you and I know your heart. I don't usually like to do podcasts, but as soon as you ask me, I go anything for Anna.
I'm so honored. Thank you so much. And
Thank you, Anna.
thank you everybody for tuning into this week's episode of the Framework Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.